And of course, you're tuned in to the People Station 101 Jams, and this is In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and yours truly, Charles Lewis. And so right now, to join in on a discussion to talk about our community, about our local education, and how we can volunteer and get involved and maybe be a little more engaged about what's going on in our local school systems and our representatives. We have a very special guest with us, someone that I'm pretty sure is no stranger to any of our listeners, Dr. Bernard Hairston, and he's Executive Director of Community Engagement for Albemarle County Public Schools. How are you today, Dr. Hairston?
It's a great day.
It is. Thank you very much for joining us on 101 Jams, in my humble opinion.
It's my pleasure to be here, in my humble opinion.
And because I know you're a busy man, and but you're always about the community, volunteering, helping out in many great ways. So we want to get the listeners acclimated a little more to the man, the legend of Dr. Hairston, and things that you have going on in the community. So as I mentioned, you're the Executive Director for Community Engagement for Albemarle County Schools. And so elaborate on that a bit for us. Let us know exactly what that office entails.
First of all, I have the best job in the school system.
Okay.
In my humble opinion. I must say, secondly, that anyone who decides to become an educator is very, very bright because they're investing in the future and they're doing it out of the heart. They're doing it out of the head, and they're doing it because they know that they can make a difference. Being an educator is one of the best positions or one of the best careers that one could walk into for the right person because you have such a impact on others.
Right.
If I had to do it all over again, most definitely, this is the field that I would take.
Good stuff. And I do know that that Albemarle County Schools, usually ranks within the top tier when it comes to state schools on most reports and most grading scales for our public schools. So how does it feel to be a part of what was looked at popularly as a pretty prestigious public school in Virginia, and being in this area of Charlottesville?
Well, anytime you operate within a school system, it's all about the personnel. Albemarle County has been very fortunate to be a part of a community that values education, from our parents to the leaders that we have through the university, but those who decide to stay and invest in education. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of a system that values investing resources into output in order to make sure that our students are competitive on a local, state, and national and international level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the statistics that I saw, actually, which was very impressive, which is Albemarle County Schools. A lot of people don't know this when I talk to them about it, but they rank as one of the highest as far as the actual use of tax dollars that goes towards education. So that's actually a big pat on the back compared to some other schools, to know that we have leadership that really is invested within our kids' education. So and one question for you, before we get a little deeper into some specifics of which you are involved in, what's the relationship, if any, with Charlottesville City Schools as far as your post? And there may not be any, but I know that's a question that's been brought to my attention because it's probably because since you're such a solid figure in the community, people see how you work with a lot of young people. But does your office have any crossing with the city schools, or is it just Albemarle County?
Well, we're always looking at partnerships as a part of the Office of Community Engagement. And yes, we do have partnerships in place with Charlottesville City Schools.
Okay.
For example, with the IMHO program, the High School Scholars Program, that's a part of the 100 Black Men of Central Virginia. The African American Teaching Fellows Program has a strong partnership between Albemarle County and the city as well. But you first started with asking the question about the Office of Community Engagement and what we do. And I kind of talked about having the best position in the school division. And the position was started I think it was around 2007 or thereabouts, maybe 2005, and it was designed to engage the community with our division mission and goals. When I started working this position, then I looked at the existing 5 goals of the division, looked at the weaknesses that we have, and started building programs, because it was, when I started, the program was in its 2nd year. So I got a chance to build a program based on needs. And so there were a couple goals, division goals, that stood out in terms of areas of need. The goal of recruiting and retaining a cadre of teachers with a unwritten statement of going after minority teachers, because we had so few in the system. Another goal that stood out for me in terms of a weakness was not closing, but eliminating the achievement gap. And that was huge. So as a result of looking at those goals, looking at the needs that we have in the division, programs have been developed over time, primarily around those 2 areas. Right. The African American Teaching Fellows Program, addressing that goal of recruiting minority teachers. Right now, I would say that Albemarle County Public Schools definitely has a strong partnership with the African American Teaching Fellows Program. And I would say an extremely high percentage of the African American teachers that are being hired by Albemarle County teachers, by Albemarle County Public Schools, are African American Teaching Fellows. And so through my work, through the Office of Community Engagement, that strong partnership has been built, and it's sustainable at this point in time. Looking at that, the goal of eliminating the achievement gap, that goal, I guess, supports the work that we've done with the founding of the 100 Black Men of Central Virginia, because we looked at the achievement of our African American males, and it wasn't very good at all. So we organized that particular nonprofit organization to assist the area school divisions in addressing the achievement gaps of African American males. So those partnerships exist not only with the city of Charlottesville, but also with surrounding school divisions to support needs.
Right. And so when I hear the term community engagement, then do you feel that mission of things, including closing the achievement gap, fits into to community engagement because of the population that the county is serving that may have been, for lack of better terms, maybe left behind in the past? So when we think of community engagement, do you feel like that it's about sort of getting our community in order, so to speak? So a reason for reaching out to the civic groups such as the 100, in order to help close the achievement gap. So that community engagement with the education piece, do you feel like it's one and the same, or is it separate?
Well, first of all, the mission of the Office of Community Engagement with Albemarle County Public Schools is written such that the responsibility of the office is to inform, to inspire, to involve a broad spectrum of our community in partnerships to empower our students and encourage lifelong learners. So with the work that I just talked about, I had the opportunity to step in and build a program based around very specific needs that I felt through my experience as being a teacher, a middle school teacher, a middle school principal, a high school associate principal, a high school acting principal, and looking at the specific needs at the point in time that I came into this position and addressing some of those needs through programming. Thus, programs such as partnerships with some of our low-income neighborhoods, such as Southwood, Barracks West, Parks Edge, going into schools and creating a community, a cultural ambassadors program, because we have so many minorities going into our schools, or so many of our students seeing minorities. We create a program where minorities will come in and read to students, so you can control the image. Sometimes the images that we see and that young people see are not always the image that we want portrayed of our community. So programs such as the Cultural Community Ambassadors Program, where we look at our largest minority populations, such as African American being a little less than 12%, our Hispanic a little less than 12%, our Asian population about 5%. And so we identify people with those backgrounds. We select certain books, we put them in schools so that they can model positive images for our students to see. So that, I mean, we do a lot. I mean, we have partnerships so many partnerships with organizations going into schools to tutor, to mentor, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, for example. You name it. We have hundreds of partnerships that we manage with a purpose. There's always an intent behind it. Generally, with a partnership, we create a memorandum of understanding. So this is the intent of it. These are the expected outcomes. For example, we have an artist in residence program. And when we talk about achievement of students, sometimes it's all about turning that light bulb on for that student. And oftentimes with some of our underachieving or our marginalized students, we haven't found that light, that switch to turn that light bulb on. And oftentimes we teach a certain sort of way rather than teaching to the needs of the students. And so we created a program called the Artist in Residence Program because we all learn so differently. So we find individuals in the community with certain skills, certain talents, and then we look at our standards of learning. And then we say, okay, let's mesh your skill that you bring to the table, whether or not you are a singer, a dancer. I mean, we have dancers coming in teaching math. So we look at their individual skills, we tie it into a standard, and then we teach it to students. We write lesson plans. We bring those people into the school to teach kids a different sort of way so those light bulbs come on. So when we talk about partnerships, it's all about looking at needs. It's all about having an ideal, and it's all about taking that ideal and turning it into a plan. So we probably could talk for days with all the programs that we have because it's limitless. And that's what's so fun about being in education. People criticize those standards of learning. The standards are not the problem. The standards are good. It's structure. It's all about how you teach it, not what you teach, but how you teach it. Bringing an artist into a classroom and having them dance and establish what a pattern is, in math, array what it is in math, and kids can see it, they can feel it. The light bulb comes on.
And I want to get back to that. I don't want to lose that point of how we're engaging, particularly our kids of color. Even more specifically, our African American boys. But before I do that, though, I'm thinking as a parent. So for the parent that's listening right now, and they say, well, my child, I feel like is coming up short because he's not being engaged. What's the process of the school system for that message to reach your office? Meaning, what a flow chart do you recommend to the parent if they have a question, about their child, if they have questions about the way that their child is being engaged, whether they want to switch classrooms? Is that first the teacher, or at what point would they contact an office such as yourself, or is that between you and the principal? Tell us how that works.
The process. If you're a parent and you're not satisfied with anything that's going on with your child, okay, we work for you, okay? The process starts with the teacher first. Okay, if you don't get the results, then you contact the administrator. Okay, after contacting the administrator, if you're not pleased, you can call the office of the superintendent. If you don't want to talk to the superintendent, dial 293-0288 and ask for Dr. Bernard Hairston.
Okay,
he's in charge of community engagement, and I will work on any problem.
Got you. Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a break real quick, and what I want to do when we get back to close out the segment is to dig a little deeper into our African American males, because I know that's something, besides you serving, the county public school system as a whole, I know our African American boys' achievement is something very near and dear to your heart. So I want to get into that, if that's okay, along with some of the partner groups that you actually hold position with here within the community. And so we try to tackle this issue of the achievement gap and why does it so heavily affect our African-American boys. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. And thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Charles Lewis, Maxilia Robinson, and our special guest, Dr. Hairston, on In My Humble Opinion. Be right back.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Charles Lewis and Maxilia Robinson, only on 101 Jam.
And welcome back to our conversation with Dr. Albemarle Hairston, Executive Director of Community Engagement for Albemarle County Public Schools. But now we want to shift a little bit to get a little more specific into some of the community groups that Dr. Hairston is a part of when it comes to tackling specifically the achievement gap, but more overall the development of our young African American boys who seem to be, what most stats would show, the most heavily affected when it comes to certain disparities within education and in society in general. And there's a lot of success stories, but as most of us know, there's still a lot of work to do. So Dr. Hairston, Malik El-Shabazz, a.k.a. Malcolm X, made a pretty poignant statement when he said that we are the only group of people who trust the same ones that enslaved us to educate us. So first, I would like to get your opinion on your interpretation of that, and then a little deeper into what's some methods that you're taking and that you feel as a community we should be engaging in to better help our young men for them to be ready to be educated, for them to go to school ready to be educated, number one, but just to make them, well-rounded men. So what's your thoughts on that phrase?
Wow, Charles, you set me up here. In my humble opinion, we're talking about a heck of an opinion here, with a quote from Malcolm X. How we are the only group of people that trust the people that enslave us. Mm-hmm. You have to understand then who black folk are. Mm-hmm. We are very trusting. And so he may have described that as a weakness, but some of us might look at that as a strength. Trust is not a bad thing, okay? Mm-hmm. Because it definitely reduces stress until after the fact when someone, kind of screws it all up. Mm-hmm. But I think, we all grew up with the intent of looking at the positive rather than the negative, and trust starts with the positive. And absolutely, we parents send their African-American sons, their daughters to school, and they trust that the teachers are going to do the right thing each and every day. But then we look at data and we see that by second grade, many of our students are behind. Okay, mm-hmm. They're reading, their math skills, their self-confidence, all of that is behind. Something happens, okay? Right, because those students walk in with that trust, and then there's something that just kind of breaks down in terms of that relationship building. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that we have to do a much better job of as educators. And it's not just with our African-American students, it's our low-income families. Mm-hmm. It's many of our ethnic groups that are a part of this changing demographics, student demographics that our schools are facing. So we have to change the structures in order to stay ahead of the game. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of issues as educators. So one thing that I'm doing, I always try to stay ahead of the curve. We as in my group of what we call diversity resource teachers. We offer resources to the other teachers in our school around equity education. And we have been researching what culturally responsive pedagogy should look like. We have looked at national research, and we have personalized it to what it should look like for our teachers in Albemarle County Public Schools, our students in Albemarle County Public Schools, and we have narrowed it down to 3 primary characteristics that we should focus on. In my humble opinion, if we don't implement programs very serious to very similar to those 3 characteristics and retrain our teachers how to address the needs of all of our students through this changing demographics, those gaps that we're talking about are going to get larger and larger because we're not doing the job that we should be doing with connecting, establishing relationships with all of our students, because many of them come in with that whole notion of, I trust you. Right, you are the teacher. I trust you. There's no right and wrong about you. I trust you.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, we have a tremendous responsibility as educators.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one of the comments that you made earlier was about the artistry and artists playing a part in being engaged and implemented within the classroom setting. That's very crucial and key because one of the things that I read was that it seems that people from different demographics, different backgrounds, different genetics, you can even say from the hemisphere split, northern hemisphere versus southern hemisphere. So pretty much southern hemisphere being people of color actually learn more right brain. I think that was it, right brain. And whereas people of European descent tend to learn more left brain, meaning, it's more about, I could see it, I could write it, like that's it. And I could pick it up better. Whereas the more interaction seems to be a natural and keen way for a student of color to usually be engaged and really understand something. For them to actually get up, go to the board, write it themselves, or, draw it out more so than it just being audible. So I think that's a key part, and you can feel free to elaborate on that as well. But when we think about that and think about the diversity piece, what's your opinion on there being more teachers of color, and just sort of taking for granted that they'll be able to educate students of color versus, say, the diversity training that may happen? Because I heard you mention the diversity training piece. So do you feel like that would be equal? You could take someone and sort of train them and give them background on respecting diversity. Do you think that's as powerful as having a teacher that looks like you?
See, we have to operate in the current state, but plan for the future. The current state is the majority of the teachers in Albemarle County, city of Charlottesville, are white females. Mm-hmm, okay? Mm-hmm. In the future, that may change, but we're still seeing fewer and fewer minorities who are willing to become educators. To me, that's a simple question. It's all about training. It's all about professional development. It's all about having our educators look at things differently and do things differently, honoring the background and experiences that the students who are sitting in front of them bring to the table, and then to adjust who you are based on the learning preference of those students. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about the different hemispheres from whence people come, sounds like to me you've been reading some of your wife's books. Okay, sounds like to me. Yes, that's right. She is one of our diversity resource teachers, and we know that based on the research, if we're not teaching to and through the background and experiences of our students, then we're going to lose them eventually. When we lose them, then we have those gaps that we're talking about. We have to learn how to bring them in by creating assignments that connect with who they are, not with who I am as a teacher, because I'm going to teach to my strengths if you allow me to, because that's my comfort zone. I got to move outside of my comfort zone and find out who Charles is, okay? Find out who Lucy is, find out who Jimmy Ray is, and teach to him, give examples with the projects that, I'm prescribing to him.
Yeah. And so let me go back and speak on behalf of the parent, because one thing that I hear from some of our listeners is that they and maybe the trust factor that we spoke of, as far as just trusting that, okay, if I send my child to school, with their lunch and with their homework done, then I don't have to do anything else. Speak to us a little bit on that parent representation. As far as the decision making there within the schools and the power that the parent has, as far as if they feel like my kid isn't engaged in this class, or I feel like my kid could do advanced work or honors work. What power does a parent have within schools if they feel like that their kid has proven and shown that they're able to do advanced work, but they may not be placed in advanced classes?
Well, the parent is the parent. The parent is a partner, or should be a partner. And if he or she is not a partner, then they need to demand that they are a partner. Not going into school yelling and screaming, but having a conversation with the teacher, with the administrator, to let them know up front that I am invested. This is my boy. This is my daughter. These are my babies. And I'm their first teacher. This is what I know about them, and we have to work in partnership to make this happen. So in terms of, the direct question about whether or not your child should be in an honors level class, you have to respect the educators and what they see on a day-to-day basis. But the educators also have to respect the parents. So there's got to be this mutual relationship, a conversation, a sense of trust, okay, between that parent and that educator to do what's right for that child. And it starts with, building a sense of trust that oftentimes must start with the teacher. And if it doesn't start with the teacher, then that parent must be empowered to step out and say, I am going to connect with this teacher. Okay. Now, if that's not happening, then you need organizations such as the 100 Black Men of Central Virginia who are having sessions with parents to train them how to engage with school personnel. And to empower them to feel confident going in, working with teachers, to feel confident having conversations with their children beyond, what did you do today? Nothing. And that's not okay. That's not okay. It's all about training. It's all about doing things differently if you're not getting the results that you want.
Right. So speaking of the 100, let's we have a few minutes left, couple of minutes left. Let's just let's close out by you highlighting any of those civic groups that you're involved in, and any activities that you may have coming up. Parents that may want some mentoring for their kids. Let us know about a couple of organizations that you're a part of that would be helpful to our listeners.
Well, that's pretty broad based there. So we are working on building a stronger partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters, whereby they would go into our middle schools and elementary schools and work with students who have been identified by their guidance counselors who need some mentoring support. We have a memorandum of understanding on the attorney's desk right now. That should be rolled out very shortly, and that program could be very powerful in terms of serving a large number of students who need support from an adult. The African American Teaching Fellows is a growing program specifically for African Americans who would like to be certified as a teacher in this area. And for every year that you receive financial support from the African American Teaching Fellows Program, you have to give back to employment in the city or the county. And you have to apply. Let's say that you apply and neither of those systems offer you a position, then you can go outside, but you're not obligated to pay. So if you are someone who's in a field like yours and you really want to become a teacher because you've been influenced by someone talking to you on the radio and say that teaching is the best thing in the world, and all of a sudden you're going to go out and tell your wife, I want to become a teacher, that's called a career switcher. AATF can help you in terms of financial support to do that, because we need more committed educators, more minorities, of course, into our schools. Right now, I think that 7% of Albemarle County teachers are African American, 13% are minorities. That just, that doesn't get it. We have to do a better job.
And just for clarification, so African American should be taken literally, or is it open to people of color who may feel they're of African descent, or is it African American teachers are the focus?
When you talk about the African American Teaching Fellows Program,
yes,
we've had that discussion as a board of directors for years, and the answer is you must be an African American to be considered as a part of the African American Teaching Fellows Program. Okay,
and a quick question too. This is something that always comes up, and I'm glad you brought it to my attention. As far as that disparity for the African American teachers, or of African American teachers rather, what's some steps that's being taken, maybe even by your office, or maybe the community and within another organization, to try to attract the African American teachers? Or what do you feel like is the issue there to why the percentage is so low of African American teachers? Because I have my own opinions, but
that is a challenge.
Yeah.
There are so few African Americans who are endorsed to become educators. Mm-hmm. And for the few who are out there and capable of doing the job at the level that we seek here in Albemarle County, it becomes very competitive to hire those. And then after we hire them, we have the challenge of retaining them. If you are one of few African American teachers in a school, you feel isolated. You may not feel comfortable, and so we may not be able to keep you very long. So it's not only the challenge of hiring them in a very competitive environment, but it's also the challenge of recruiting, retaining them. So, for example, today, I'm supposed to be at a session right now. It's a special invitation for teachers in Albemarle County Public Schools who have an interest in diversity. And so invitations were sent to all of our diversity resource teachers, all of our minority teachers, and it's called a gathering of folk. And we're talking about how do we retain, how do we build a sense of community among teachers of color. How do we build that bond so that they can do a better job of representing themselves and representing a skill set that would attract others to come into the system and say, boy, you're doing well. This is a great school system. And for parents to say, wow, this is such a good teacher. I want another teacher who looks like Sharika Jones Lewis or any other minority teacher. So we have to do some special things to kind of nurture them along in order to, first make sure that they are as good as advertised. And I'm not sure if you heard of a local new group called the BPN, Black Professionals Network. Yes. Okay, and I definitely can get you that contact information for that group, because I think that's that mission of attracting people of color to the area, to let them know that it is things to do here on the social scene, as well as there is a network of people here for you to feel comfortable about. It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because we hear a lot about that we lose a lot of our African American teachers to areas such as the Tidewater area, things like that, because of the population more resembling them. But the part that you said about them feeling comfortable, like within the work environment, like that's a piece that I think is overlooked sometimes. Of sometimes you being the only black face, in your office. Sometimes the significance of that gets overlooked. So you have to also put that in the context of the achievement gap for many of our students. Oftentimes, our students feel uncomfortable in settings, and when we work in isolation with our students, meaning that we cluster them together and we have open and frank conversations with them, they tell us about how challenging it is, how oftentimes comments are made to cause them to withdraw from the environment or to become hostile within that environment, because oftentimes they are isolated. Let me ask you this question. So in Albemarle County, there are 5 middle schools, and we have from the lowest population of about 400 in one middle school to almost 800 in our largest. And so 5 middle schools. And let's say you just look at grade 6. How many African American males would you say are in those 5 middle schools across Albemarle County? Just take a guess.
Okay. Just 6th grade.
Just 6th grade.
5 middle schools.
5 middle schools.
I'm going to say probably enough to fill one class.
So you're saying about
30.
Okay.
30.
Well, most people would say 200, 300. Okay, you probably have inside track on this, but on any given year, we're probably looking at about 65 to 75 students. Okay, so 6th graders, African American males. Yeah. Okay, very low. And so then you're looking at 2 schools like Burley and Jack Jewett, who are going to represent probably about 70% of that group. And so think about being an African American male in a school, and you're in like a certain class, like an honors language arts class, 6th grade. You may be the only student in that classroom, just like being the only African American teacher at Meriwether Lewis. Okay, you feel the same way. So the challenges are very, very similar for students, for young people as well as adults, and we have to build support systems around them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and the reason I came up with that number to my head is that when I think about the county, I think about more of the rural areas where I bet there's some, you know, schools where there's probably maybe one African American boy, you know, within the grade. You know, I could imagine. But so we're coming to a close here. Definitely appreciate all this great information, and I hope you all have as well. So, are there any closing remarks for us on anything you feel like that we may have missed?
Well, I mean, you ask a question about some of the services provided by our partnering groups, and I talked about ATF.
Yeah, I want you to elaborate on the 100 because I know.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so first of all, the title 100 Black Men, people automatically assume that there are 100 strong, you know, black men out there giving back. So actually, it's generally around 30. And so the program is very, very structured. It's outcome based. Anytime you're talking to me as an educator, I'm going to be thinking about results. I'm not just going to be creating a program for the sake of creating a program, but I'm going to be creating a program with some intended outcomes. So when we create our mentoring programs for our African American males, it's about an intended outcome. The mission of the 100 Black Men of Central Virginia is assisting the area schools with closing achievement gaps. Right. So we're not just talking about it, it's an intentional approach to making a difference. So we have like an MQ program. It's an Algebra Readiness program for rising 5th graders through 8th graders. The overall objective is to prepare our young African American males for algebra by the time they complete middle school.
Okay.
First priority is get them in algebra by 7th grade and geometry 8th grade. When we first started establishing this program, we had one African American male in those 5 middle schools in algebra in grade 7. Okay, so we're looking to change that. So we're looking at algebra, okay, enrollment being successful, and or enrollment and completion of math at the advanced level. And so we're having a lot of success there. So in order for a parent to get their child into that program, first of all, we look at any student who's classified as an African American. The way we register students now, you can check several boxes. I'm African American, I'm Hispanic, I'm white. As long as you have one check African American, you qualify for consideration. Okay. We look at an aptitude for math because, you know, principals are not just going to place anybody in an advanced level class. So we start with like what their math SOL score is. The passing is 400. The maximum is 600. So we start with 425. Any student with 425 or higher, and 425, you're talking about, you know, just an above average student, if an average or an average student. We identify those names. We send those names to the principal and say, would you consider placing this child in an upper level class, provided they complete our 2-week summer academy, and we assign them a mentor to establish a strong relationship with the home and school. That's how that program starts. We don't just accept kids in the program because a parent will call and say, will you mentor my child? Well, we'd love to serve every child, but we have a limited number of mentors, but we also have a strategic intent to impact achievement. And then we have a high school scholars program where we are serving African American males in our 9 area school divisions, and there are about 1,200 African American males only in the 9 area school divisions, of which there are 12 high schools, grades 9 through 12. Right. So we identify African American males with a 3.0 or higher, and our goal there is also to impact achievement. And so when we first started looking at the data there, and people think that, okay, so a kid has a 3.0, they're doing fine. That's not the case, okay? You know, some school divisions that we looked at had as low as 5% of their African-American males with a 3.0. And when we first started doing this, you know, it was a 14% average. That's moved up to 24% just by doing some group mentoring, tracking results, doing monthly programs, presenting positive images collectively for groups of students through group mentoring. And then we have a collegiate 100 group of young men, about 30, who are being mentored at the University of Virginia, and then of course we have the mentors of the 100. So it's kind of a mentoring down effect. The men of the 100 are serving all three of those groups. The collegiate 100 students are focusing on supporting the high school students, and now the high school students are supporting some of our middle school students. Right. And so it's kind of a impact that's looking at one thing, and that is creating strong leaders with competence, because they are seeing others who are positive.
Right.
And it's making a huge difference.
And the one thing I think you may not have mentioned was that besides being rewarded with becoming a better student and a better young man, but there's also the scholarships at the end of completion of the program as well, correct? Well,
the scholarship at the completion of the program, yes, in the last, 5 years, I think we've awarded $93,000. But we don't focus on scholarships. It's all about the development to get there. When we took a group of students to see Race, the movie about Jesse Owens, and we asked them, why do we do this? Why would the 100 black men of Central Virginia create an opportunity for you to see a film such as this? What are we expecting you to take away from it? So we're creating thinkers. We're creating men of character. We're creating difference makers, because we're looking at some of the challenges that we had as men, African American men, and trying to coach them not to make some of the same mistakes, but also to understand the challenges that are ahead of them.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that drew me to the organization is that it's about being well-rounded young men and actually dealing with the entirety of who they are as a person, not just saying if your grades are good, grades are bad. It's really more than that. It's about them, having that healthy mind, as well as their their physical nature being healthy as well. The way that you conduct yourself, plays a big part into if you can conduct yourself correctly in a classroom. So yeah, I definitely applaud the work of the organization, and I thank you once again for joining us. We're out of time, but I'm sure there'll be many more successes going on here locally with our students and our schools, as well as your career, because you have a good how many more decades you got serving us in the
At
schools?
least one more decade.
Okay, all right. That's what I want to hear. Well, thank you, sir. And,
yes, sir.
And we look forward to talking to you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.